بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وبه نستعين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. We're reciting today from page number 255, Surah Al-Ra'd, the last verse, and the first 5 verses of Surah Ibrahim. Page number 255. Yes. Page number 255, the last verse of Surah Al-Ra'd and the first 5 verses of Surah Ibrahim. Making me doubt my own numbers now. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ويقول الذين كفروا لست مرسلا قل كفى بالله شهيدا بيني وبينكم ومن عنده علم الكتاب بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ألف لام را كتاب أنزلناه إليك لتخرج الناس من الظلمات إلى النور بإذن ربهم إلى صراط العزيز الحميد الله الذي له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وويل للكافرين من عذاب شديد الذين يستحبون الحياة الدنيا على الآخرة ويصدون عن سبيل الله ويبغونها عوجا أولئك في ضلال بعيد وما أرسلنا من رسول إلا بلسان قومه ليبين لهم فيذل الله من يشاء ويهدي من يشاء وهو العزيز الحكيم ولقد أرسلنا موسى بآياتنا أن أخرج قومك من الظلمات إلى النور وذكرهم بأيام الله إن في ذلك لآيات لكل صبار شكور صدق الله العلي العظيم. The last verse captures the last objection, or one of the main objections that was raised in Surah Al-Ra'd, which is that the people of Mecca did not want to believe in the Holy Prophet as a messenger of God. So the Qur'an says, وَيَقُولُوا الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا, those who disbelieve, they say, لَسْتَ مُرْسَلًا, you are not a messenger of God. So Allah directs the Prophet of Allah to answer them and to let them know, especially the leaders of the Quraysh, the leaders of the people of Mecca, tell them that I do not need your approval and I do not need your acceptance to say whether I am a messenger of God or I am not a messenger of God. And people as well don't need your approval, right? قُلْ كَفَى بِاللَّهِ شَهِيدًا بَيْنِي وَبَيْنَكُمْ. Tell them that between me and between you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sufficient as a witness. If God says I'm a messenger, then that is sufficient. Now let me ask you a question over here. If I and you were having an argument and I said something is red and you say something is blue, and you came and asked me and said, well, what is your proof for it? And if I came and told you, well, because God says so. God is sufficient as a witness that it is red, and therefore it is red. Would you be satisfied with that? You wouldn't be satisfied. And yet the Prophet of God is being told, tell them that between me and you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sufficient as a witness and somebody who testifies to me being a prophet. So why does this argument work for him? The Mufassirin have explained this in two ways. Some of them have said, O Prophet, tell them that you don't need the approval of the leadership. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you enough arguments. And we saw enough arguments in these verses of the Qur'an. God has given you enough signs. Those arguments and signs, that's the evidence of your prophethood, and not their approval, and not their acceptance. That gives you your prophethood. But the second thing which Allama Tabatabai explains, which is also very beautiful, he says, however, there's one thing we should note over here, that these words are not the words of me and you. The assumption here is that these words are what? The words of the Qur'an. And the Qur'an is the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Qur'an says, Yasin wal Qur'anil Hakim innaka laminal mursaleen. The Qur'an says so many times you are a messenger of God. And the mushrikeen knew that these verses of the Qur'an were not ordinary verses. Even those who openly rejected, in their hearts they knew this came from a much higher power. So he says, whether you approve of it publicly or not, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you know Allah has said it in the Qur'an, that I am a messenger of God. وَمَنْ عِنْدَهُ عِلْمُ الْكِتَابِ, and the one who has knowledge of the book. And again, this has been interpreted in a number of ways. Number one, the people of the book. If you were to ask them, many of them will give you the signs of prophethood, and they know that those signs of prophethood are found in the Holy Prophet. Number two, it could be people who are very familiar with the Qur'an. Those who actually read the Qur'an and they read the eloquence of the Qur'an, they will testify that this book is no ordinary book, and the one who has brought it is a messenger of God. But thirdly, in many of the ahadith we're told that those who have knowledge of the book refers to the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, in particular refers to the first Imam. So in the hadith from Imam al-Baqir and Imam al-Sadiq alayhima afdalus salati was salam, they both say, إِنَّ الْمُرَادَ بِهِ عَلِيُّ بْنُ أَبِي طَالِبْ وَأَئِمَّةُ الْهُدَى. What is meant by those who have knowledge of the book, whom you should go and ask, who will explain it to you very clearly, are Imam Ali and the Imams that came after him. Now we start with Surah Ibrahim, which is Surah number 14 of the Qur'an. It's called Ibrahim because one of the most important stories that will appear in this surah is the story of Prophet Ibrahim. The stories of other prophets are also going to appear in this surah. And the surah is going to talk about two or three main concepts. The first one, Tawheed. The second one, Nubuwah. And the third one, Ma'ad or Qiyamah. Okay? And it's going to run us through the stories of a number of prophets. And if you notice something about that, when I tell you about the general theme of the surah, you will tell me that, but so many surahs have passed, and you've told us it has the same general theme. It talks about monotheism. It talks about prophethood. It talks about the day of judgment, and it runs us. How many surahs have we already seen where we have gone through stories of the prophets of God? Surah Yunus was like that, for example, right? Even Surah Hud, for example, was exactly like that. And here comes another surah that makes us go through the same process once again. So I want you to think about that. That imagine if a person who understands Arabic and the Arabic of the Qur'an and regularly recites the Qur'an from the beginning to the end, and he absorbs the messages of the Qur'an. When he gets through parts of the Qur'an, especially the first part of the Qur'an, what are some of the most important concepts going to be in his heart? They're going to be Tawheed, they're going to be Nabuwah, they're going to be Qiyamah. What is the most important concept in his lifestyle? Tawheed, Nubuwah, and Qiyamah. And God, it seems, designed it that way. Meaning these concepts are very important concepts. You know what I understand from that? I understand that according to the Qur'an, if you want to be a good person, you first have to believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you have to believe in messengers of God. And you have to believe in Yawm al-Qiyamah. And then perform righteous deeds. Right? And it's very important, if the Qur'an has given importance to something in surah after surah after surah after surah, and we're seeing it for ourselves, then we also give importance at the same level to those things as well. Right? And sometimes perhaps we don't do as much. Because sometimes we say, you know what, there's no difference between different religions. They all teach the same thing, for example. Or so what if a person doesn't believe in God, as long as he's a good person? Well, the Qur'an is very clear. If believing in God was not important, then how come we've gone through 5, 7, 8, 9 surahs in the first 14 surahs of the Qur'an, and the messages are the same? Believe in one God, believe in prophets of God, believe in the hereafter. Okay? So we'll see the same messages over here. Alif, Lam, Ra. These are huruf muqatta'at. We've seen them before. Kitabun, a book. أنزلناه إليك. We have revealed it to you. For what purpose? لِتُخْرِجَ النَّاسَ. So that you may take people out. Okay, pay attention to a couple of things over here. Number one, it doesn't say so that you may take the Quraysh out, or the Arabs out, or, for example, your own family out. No, لِتُخْرِجَ النَّاسَ. Meaning this Qur'an is for what? For all of mankind. The Prophet of Allah is a messenger for all of mankind. Number two, so that you may take out. The Prophet of Allah may do that. I want you to keep that in mind because we're coming back to something. لِتُخْرِجَ النَّاسَ مِنَ الظُّلُمَاتِ. From dhulumat, from darknesses, into إِلَى النُّور, to light. And one thing we've seen before, the Qur'an, whenever it talks about darkness, it always uses plural, dhulumat. Whenever it talks about light, it always uses singular, right? Even I think in Ayatul Kursi, it's like that, right? I can't remember what the verse is, but it says, ظُلُمَاتِ إِلَى النُّورِ اللَّهُ وَلِيُّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا يُخْرِجُهُم مِّنَ الظُّلُمَاتِ إِلَى النُّورِ. All right? And that's because the source of guidance is only one. The haqq is only one. The truth is only one, and that is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But misguidance, there are many avenues of it. Right? What does dhulumat refer to? Dhulumat means one, not having knowledge, not having faith, injustice, corruption, ignorance, sin. These are dhulumat. And nur, light, is what? Light is guidance. Light is faith. Light is knowledge. Light is righteousness. So, Prophet of God, this book is there to reform people, to take them out of darknesses into light, بِإِذْنِ رَبِّهِمْ, with the permission, بِإِذْنِ رَبِّهِمْ, with the permission of their Lord. And that's important over there, because it says, O Prophet, you're going to take them out, but you're only doing this with the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Remember when Prophet Isa used to perform miracles? And the Qur'an says, oh, he brought the dead back to life, bi'idhnillah, with the permission of God. And he also gave sight to the blind, bi'idhni Allah, with the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even the Prophet guides with the permission of God. إِلَى صِرَاطِ الْعَزِيزِ الْحَمِيدِ. To the path of Aziz. Aziz is somebody undefeatable, indomitable. You cannot overcome him. That's Aziz. Hamid is somebody who is praiseworthy, who is worthy of praise. Now, the next statement explains why he is Aziz, explains why he is Hamid. Allah الذي له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض. Allah, the one to whom belongs whatever is in the heavens and whatever is in the earth. Now, we've talked about the sovereignty of God. And we say that ownership is of two types. There's real ownership and there is arbitrary or conventional ownership. My ownership of this mouse, for example, is arbitrary ownership. Today I own it, tomorrow somebody else owns it. Somebody can come and take it away from me, I no longer have it. Real ownership is something nobody can take away from you. Right? When you say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the owner of the universe, it's real ownership. He controls it. He subjugates it. It always belongs to him. It can never be separated from him. If that's the case, if he truly owns everything, can anything overcome him? It can't. Anything that you see happening in the heavens and the earth, can anybody do it other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? No, they can't. That's why He is Aziz, He is undefeatable, undomitable, and He is Hamid. Anything good that you see, but He's the owner, and He's the one who's made it happen. Now, what if a person rejected that? And what kind of punishment would they face? So Allah says, فَوَيْلُ لِلَّذِينَ وَوَيْلُ لِلْكَافِرِينَ مِنْ عَذَابٍ شَدِيدٍ. And woe be to those who are ungrateful, those who disbelieve, from a very painful punishment. Now the next verse is a very interesting verse. It talks about the attributes or the qualities of the kafirin. Let's look at those qualities. It's very interesting because when it talks about those qualities, it doesn't even talk about, their faith in particular, whether they believe in God or not. If you want to know whether a person truly believes in God, they truly believe in the hereafter, they truly believe in the prophets of God, then these are some of the qualities you will see or you won't see within them. Number one, الَّذِينَ يَسْتَحِبُّونَ الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا عَلَى الْآخِرَةِ. The kafirin are those who prefer and love the life of this world over the akhirah. Right? يَسْتَحِبُّونَ, it means when somebody strives and works hard for something that he likes and he loves. عَلَى الْآخِرَةِ means he's willing to even sacrifice something else to achieve it. Right? The kuffar are those who are willing to strive for the dunya because they love it, and they're willing to sacrifice the akhirah even to achieve it. Sometimes I think to myself that is it just talking about the kuffar or those people whom we consider the kuffar? What about in my own life? Do I live my life for the akhirah and take care of my dunya? Or do I live my life for the dunya and once in a while I take care of the akhirah? Right? When I think about a home, am I only thinking about my home in the dunya? Am I more focused about my home in the akhirah? Think about the clothes that I'm going to wear. Am I just always focused about my clothes in the dunya? What's the newest fashion? How can I get money for it? What's somebody else wearing? What are they saying about what I'm wearing? Or am I more focused about my clothes in the akhirah? And because I have to live in this world, I get some clothes for the dunya as well. I was recently traveling and I was in Chicago. And at the conference there, they had a bookstall. I came across a beautiful book. It's also available online, so you can find it on alislam.org. I think it's called Political Leadership of Imam Ali. It's a collection of ahadith about his political leadership. Beautiful collection of ahadith. Beautiful translation as well. So I came across a hadith over there that I had shared with the mu'mineen, a part of it, of that hadith. But in that book, I found the whole hadith, the whole detail of it. It's beautiful when you read the hadith line by line, because you find nuances in the hadith that tell you a little bit more about Imam Ali. Right? So some of you remember I'd shared with you that a young man once, he was walking in the bazaar in Kufa and his dress was very long. Right? So Imam told him, raise your dress because that is cleaner for you and closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, more pious for you as well. So the man asked, who is this man who told me to raise my dress? Yeah? And they said, that's Amirul Mu'mineen. So he said, I followed him. It was early in the morning perhaps. And this man used to sit in the bazaar in Kufa. I followed him and he went in the bazaar of the camel sellers. And this is what he did in the bazaar of the camel sellers. You get some details over there. Then he went to the bazaar of the date sellers. And this is what he did in the bazaar of the date sellers. For example, there was a young lady who was trying to return some dates. The owner didn't want to accept them back. And he talked to him about her. Okay? Then he, if you remember famously, went into the bazaar of the clothes sellers. And he asked so-and-so that I've got 5 dirhams. Do you have 2 pieces of cloth for me? And the young man there said, yes, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, I do. And the narrator says that because the man recognized who he was, so Ali did not buy from him. And I can't explain to you right now why, because it becomes a very long story. But there's a reason, an ethical reason for why. As a leader and a ruler and a judge, he did not buy from him. Then he went to another person and said, do you have something for two pieces of clothes for 5 dirhams? And he said yes, but did not recognize the Imam. So the Imam bought it from him. One for 3 dirham, the other for 2 dirham. Yeah? Then he came to Qambar and said, you take the one for 3, I keep the one for 2. So there's a conversation that happens there. And Qambar says to the Imam, but Imam, you sit on the mimbar and you give the khutbah, it's better you wear the better one. And the Imam says, no. Number one, because you are young and you have youthful desires, it's better that you wear the better one. And number two, I would hate to give myself preference over you, because I have heard the Prophet of Allah saying, with respect to your slaves and with respect to your servants, that you clothe them from what you wear and feed them from what you eat yourselves, right? So I didn't want to take something better and give you something which is worse off. Now, the last part is why I actually told you the whole story. This is what I found in the book, in the narration. It's beautiful. It says the Imam put the cloth on, the shirt on right away. Okay? And it turned out the sleeves were long. The sleeves were long up until here. So he told the young man over there, cut the sleeves off. So the man came and snipped them off over here. So the Imam, when he saw he snipped off the sleeves, well, it's not finished. You need to hem it. Yeah? He says, come, let me hem it for you very quickly. And the Imam looked at him and said, don't worry, this too shall pass. And he left. Couldn't even be bothered to have it hemmed. Now, the point of this story is not that we should not wear good clothes, or that, we should start cutting off our sleeves as well for tomorrow. The point is that he was so busy preparing for his akhirah. He was so focused on his clothes for his akhirah. He was so focused in administrating justice and making sure that, the bazaar is being administrated with justice, that he had no time to worry about the dunya. So now it's a little bit off. And what I like to do there is just compare it to the way we live life. So much importance we sometimes give to clothes. Is it brand name? Is it not brand name? Do people wear it in this season? Did they wear it last season? Is it the fashion for 2018? Is it the fashion for 2019? Will people remember that I wore the same cloth at the last kushali or the last wedding? If they do, then, can I wear the same thing? الَّذِينَ يَسْتَحِبُّونَ الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا عَلَى الْآخِرَةِ, right? When we live like that, where we give preference to the life of this world and we work for it more than the akhirah, then what's the difference between us and those? وَيَصُدُّونَ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَيَبْغُونَهَا عِوَجًا. And number two, well, they're not on the right path, but they also block other people from coming to the right path. And not only that, but they try to show the right path as the wrong path. Now, I've said this before, that sometimes when we're not able to do something, at least in our hearts, we should have the desire, Ya Allah, one day give me that tawfiq to be able to do that. Today I can't do it. Right? You say, for example, أُحِبُّ الصَّالِحِينَ وَلَسْتُ مِنْهُمْ. I love the righteous even though I'm not one of them. You see somebody else doing something. They wake up for Salatul Layl. They come every day to the masjid. They wear their hijab properly. They don't do this haram. They don't do that haram. At least in our hearts we should say, Ya Allah, maybe if I can't do it right now, one day give me the tawfiq to be there. Sometimes what we notice is that when somebody is doing something right, instead of having this desire in our heart that we should also do it, we start reprimanding them. And we start stopping them, even in the Muslim community. Right? For example, somebody comes to another person who's wearing hijab, and they say to them, and you've heard this, that, they don't really have to wear hijab. There's no wajib. Okay, you don't want to wear it. You'll answer God for it. But why stop others who are doing the right thing from wearing the hijab? A person, sometimes their iman is not strong. Instead of working for their own iman, they come to others and say, you don't have to take it so seriously. You don't have to be so extreme about it. وَيَسُدُّونَ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. Why are you stopping others from the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? وَيَبْغُونَهَا عِوَجًا أُولَٰئِكَ فِي ضَلَالٍ بَعِيدٍ. Oh, well, these people, they're not only in misguidance, they are deep in misguidance. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا مِن رَسُولٍ إِلَّا بِلِسَانِ قَوْمِهِ لِيُبَيِّنَ لَهُمْ. and we have never sent a prophet except that we sent him with the language of his community so that he may explain to them very clearly. Prophets of God, some of them came to their own community. So when they came to their own community, they obviously spoke the language of their own community. But there were some prophets of God who migrated and they traveled. And they went from one community to another community sometimes, like Prophet Lut. Or like Prophet Ibrahim, he was sent out of his own community, so he went to another one. But even when they went to another community, they learned that language, they knew that language, they spoke to people in their own language so that it would be clear for them. Now, why is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala making a point of this over here in the Qur'an? The Mufassirin, they tell us that what the message Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was giving to the Quraysh was to tell them that, when a prophet of God comes, he doesn't just kind of blow on you or do a miracle and suddenly you have Iman. He doesn't come and force you to have Iman. He doesn't come and inspire directly into your heart and suddenly whatever he does, sometimes we do that. You take somebody to a sheikh or you take him to an alim and say, please talk to him, and make him do the right thing. And the expectation is in 5 minutes, whatever he's going to say, he'll blow on him, he'll recite some dua, and he'll be done. And that's not the way it works. Allah is telling him, the prophet who has come to you, he's going to explain it to you. He's going to, teach it to you. But then you have to choose whether you want to have Iman or you don't want to have Iman. So look at the next part of the verse. فَيُضِلُّ اللَّهُ مَنْ يَشَاءُ وَيَهْدِي مَنْ يَشَاءُ. Then God chooses to misguide whoever He wills, and God chooses to guide whoever He wills. And lest you think that God guides and misguides just at whim, the verse finishes, وَهُوَ الْعَزِيزُ الْحَكِيمُ. God is indomitable, but God is also very Hakim. He's also very wise. He gives guidance to the one who desires it. He does not give it to the one who does not have any desire for it. Now, sometimes I think that, what if I read the Qur'an and I just read it in Arabic, but I didn't understand it? I said my prayers 5 times a day, and I prayed it in Arabic, but I didn't understand it. And I did my a'mal every year. I did it in Arabic, and I didn't understand it. And I did my ghusl and wudu and tahara and everything, and I did it, but I didn't understand the philosophy or the reasoning behind it, right? On one hand. But on the other hand, when it comes to my lifestyle is not according to the Qur'an. Yeah? For example, when I make decisions, it's not based on intellect and knowledge, haphazard decisions. When it comes to spending, it's not in moderation. It is extravagant, for example, right? When it comes to, for example, many things in my life, the way I have my house, I structure my family, where I choose to live, where I don't choose to live, it's not based on لِيُبَيِّنَ لَهُمْ, what the Prophet of God has explained to us in the Qur'an. Right? Then have I really benefited from it? And Allah tells, we are sending you a prophet in your own language so that he may explain to you your beliefs, he may explain to you your way of life, he may explain to you your ethics so that you may understand it and live it, and not just recite something in a different language. Not just read something from a different language. Right? So very important for us to also implement the teachings of the Prophet in our lives. وَلَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا مُوسَى بِآيَاتِنَا أَنْ أَخْرِجْ قَوْمَكَ مِنَ الظُّلُمَاتِ إِلَى النُّورِ. Now the first example comes up, and certainly we send Musa with our signs so that you may take your people out from darknesses into light. Where have we seen this? We've seen this in the very first verse of this surah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, O Prophet of God, the way we gave you the duty to take them out of darknesses into light, the same way we had given it to Prophet Musa as well. You are doing the same thing that he was asked to do. إِلَى النُّورِ وَذَكِّرْهُمْ بِأَيَّامِ اللَّهِ. And remind them of the days of God. Ayyamullah is a concept you find in the Qur'an. It's a very important concept as well. When the people of Prophet Musa were struggling, they were told to remember the days of God. Now if you notice, every day is a day of God. So how come certain days in particular are called Ayyamullah, the days of God? Right? And we're told that on that particular day, it's because you see a particular blessing of God. You see God fulfilling one of His promises. You see some of the attributes of God. You see God being indomitable. You see Allah, you come to realize on that day. That the promise that God made, He is more than capable of fulfilling that promise. So for example, for the people of Prophet Musa, they would have remembered the day when Prophet Ibrahim was saved from Namrud, right? They would have remembered those days when the believers were successful. And so the Mufassirin say, either it refers to those days where the believers were victorious, or it refers to those days when the punishment of God came to the oppressors. Or it refers to both of those days, right? So for example, for the people of Nabi Musa, when they came out of Egypt, one of the days of God was which day? The day they were delivered from slavery and bondage, and the day Fir'aun drowned, right? That's a Yawmullah, a day of God. In the ahadith, now, Ayyamullah are not particular days. They are those days where you come to realize that this day Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed upon us. For example, in the hadith we're told the day the 12th Imam comes is Yawmullah. The day the mu'mineen come back to life is Yawmullah. The day of judgment is also Yawmullah. Imam Khomeini rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi, the 10 days before the Iranian Revolution and leading up to the Iranian Revolution, he used to call them what? Ruzhai Khuda, Ayyamullah, the days of God, because they saw the power of God when they defeated the Shah and those who supported the Shah over there. I want you to think about one thing, and we end the tafsir for today, is that the believers, when they're engaged in struggle and truly they have a purpose in life and truly they are striving for something, living the Qur'anic way of life, it's going to be difficult. So Allah says, remember the days of God. The way God fulfilled His promises to those who came before you, He will fulfill His promises upon you as well. But you compare that to our society today. Instead of remembering Ayyamullah, in our society, we remember Ayyamun Nas, the days of people. Not days which are centered around God, but days which are centered around ourselves. The day I was born, the day I got married, the day the calendar changed. Right? Even Christmas is about us and about consumerism and about spending. Right? It's, and I'm not saying whether you celebrate your birthday, you don't celebrate an anniversary or don't. And I'm not thinking about it from a fiqh perspective. I'm just saying, and you do that if you want to. But more importantly for a believer, when he's struggling, rather than remembering his own days, he must remember the days of God, right? The days where he saw the power and the rahmah and the beauty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what helps us in our struggles. Inna fi dhalika, surely in this, la ayatin, there are signs, likulli sabbarin shakur, for everyone who is very patient, everyone who is very, very grateful. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.